Just to reiterate,
Amen. Sorry.
my name is Noah, and my least favorite game is backgammon. Because somebody hyped it up a whole lot for me, and I got it for Christmas, and I played with my dad, and it was so fun.
What's it called?
Backgammon?
How do you play that?
Old people.
I thought that was the game with the net.
Yeah, badminton.
Badminton.
That would be backgammon.
Bro,
Backgammon is you have a board, and there's maybe 12 or 18 triangles, and you have a bunch of little circles, and you're moving the circles around the board. And you roll dice, and it's really just it's kind of the equivalent of Candyman, where you're just
Don't do that to me.
moving. But today I unfortunately don't have a correlation between board games and what we're about to talk about besides the Proverbs, which is, what is the purpose of a proverb?
Proverb.
It's a proverb. Proverb, not a proverb. Anybody?
What was the question?
What's the purpose of a proverb? You know, just about every world religion that has some sort of institution has a collection of proverbs.
Okay, I'll say it. She
Wait,
said,
why would
should
you
teach a lesson?
Too many people were talking. Anna, you go first.
She said, is it to teach a lesson?
Yeah, teach a lesson. What did you guys say?
Yay.
No, I got confused with something else.
I mean, why wouldn't you have a bunch of proverbs?
Yeah.
Like, I don't
Are
see
there proverbs in science?
Yeah.
If I go to Yale and I take a science class, are they going to give me some proverbial wisdom endowed in the lesson?
Well,
Not
but-
really. They'll just give
No.
you facts.
But like religion
Yeah.
is like your entire life philosophy and what you.
Exactly.
It's more like a moral story.
Yeah, exactly. A proverb is like a little slice of wisdom. It's answering a question. And if we expand that into a more global sense and ask the question, why do we have religions? What do you think? Give me short and dirty answers. Why do we have religions? Why do they exist?
Meaning
To figure out why we exist.
Yeah.
To have answers beyond our understanding.
Yeah.
For a core of your being.
Yeah.
To unite several group of people.
Pardon?
To unite several group of people with the common belief.
Yeah, exactly.
A compass.
I liked my cat.
A compass, a core, answers, a meaning. I would argue that the purpose of religion is to ask the important questions, which I think is what everybody was getting at. The really important questions: why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our meaning? What is right? What is wrong? What is sin? What is life? Colton asked me to talk about world religions, which I was so excited to do. And in thinking about that, I came to this conclusion that the point of talking about religions isn't just to learn about these things, but rather to understand how these people answered those questions and learn more about our own humanity and what we have in common by looking at the ways that they answer questions and the questions that they ask in the first place. And so in a couple minutes, I'm going to get into specifically Hinduism and then Buddhism. Why? Well, I kind of ran out of time. I wanted to cover as many as possible, but I really need a much longer time frame. And I think generally speaking, people don't know as much about Hinduism and Buddhism as they might Judaism or Islam, by a slight margin. But I need to clarify two things before I start talking about these. Before we start analyzing what questions these people ask, we kind of need a framework to build around discussing them as Christians. And luckily, we're not the first Christians to look into other religions. Do you guys know what the Council of Vatican II is? Raise your hand if you know what that is.
Say it.
The Council of Vatican II. Of course you don't.
I knew about.
Whoa!
I knew there were councils,
Dude.
like the Council of Nicaea, but I don't remember any
Exactly.
other councils.
The Catholic Church loves their councils.
Yeah.
The most recent one was in the 60s. It's called the Council of Vatican II, where a lot of very important, very devout, and intellectual Catholic thinkers and bishops and the Pope got together over the course of 5 years in several different meetings to discuss problems that they saw in the church. Really like hardcore things. They really wanted to reflect and kind of gauge at this crazy changing world and how can we still be Christians in the midst of it. They wrote a ton of documents, and they're all fascinating. If you ever get to take a class in documents of Vatican II, you should. But the one that I want to call attention today, and the most pressing one, is called Nostra, Aetate, which means in our time. So the Pope was at, Pope Paul II, he was at this Christian-Jewish sort of summit. And there was this Jewish academic there, and he said that, you know, Christian anti-Semitism paved the way for the Holocaust. And the Christians there were taken aback, probably because they thought he was right. And so during the Council of Vatican II, some Christian thinkers brought this to the attention and were like, what do we really believe about other people? And so this document was originally a manifesto on the Catholic Church's relationship to Jews, but it became a manifesto of how should Christians interact with other religions in general. And so I want to read a little excerpt of it, because this was the mindset that I was coming at with when I built this presentation. So it reads, men expect from the various religions answers to the unsolved riddles of the human condition, which today, even as in former times, deeply stir the hearts of men. What is man? What is the meaning, the aim of our life? What is moral good? What is sin? Whence suffering, and what purpose does it serve? Which is the road to true happiness? What are death, judgment, and retribution after death? What finally is the ultimate inexplicable mystery which encompasses our existence? Whence do we come, and where are we going? From ancient times down to the present, there is found among various peoples a certain perception of that hidden power, which hovers over the course of things and over the events of human history. At times, some indeed have come to the recognition of a supreme being or even of a father. This perception and recognition penetrates their lives with a profound religious sense. Skipping ahead a bit, the Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nevertheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men. Indeed, she proclaims and must proclaim Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, in whom men may find the fullness of religious life, in whom God has reconciled all things to himself. The Church therefore exhorts her sons that through dialogue and collaboration with the followers of other religions, carried out with prudence and love, and in witness to the Christian faith and life, they recognize, preserve, and promote the good things, spiritual and moral, as well as the social cultural values found among these men. So that was a lot, but there's kind of 3 points that I want to take away from this. The first one is that while other religions may not have the truth incarnate, they might not even know Jesus, they do have reflections of God's truth in aspects. And it's worth studying them and respecting what they find to be holy for the sake of our own God. And for the sake of these questions that we're all getting at. Secondly, we should foster brotherhood, right? In the case of that Jewish man, he was probably deeply disturbed by the Holocaust. And in order to foster brotherhood and love, it's really hard to do that if you're ignorant of who somebody else is. And even if you don't agree with everything I'm about to say, actually, you'll probably not agree with 90% of what I'm about to say. That's okay, because the first goal is to respect them, the second goal is to know who they are, to start a conversation. Because the third goal is to still, right, preach the gospel. And that's really why I like that document, because in the same 2 sentences, it says, we reject nothing that is holy in these groups. And then immediately says, but we still must carry out our Christian faith and proclaim Christ. So that's the perception that I'm coming at. The second sort of special rule for this lecture is essentialism. Does anybody know what these 2 pictures are? No, wait. Does anybody know what the difference between these 2 pictures are?
Yes. This is so fun.
Which one of these reflects Dios de?
The
I
first
was
one.
gonna say both, but probably the one more to the left, because it's more of a sort of a beautification of
Yes.
yours.
Does anybody know who this, great, you're absolutely right. Does anybody know who this woman on the right is?
I don't know. Let's go saint.
Yeah, basically, right?
Let's go saint.
Kind of. So this is a reflection of Dios de amor.
Dio de los muertos.
What Gabriel said. You should just say it for me. And this is honored in many Christian traditions because it's a reflection of a Christian holiday called All Saints Day. This is not.
Oh.
Do you know why? I mean, yeah, okay, that was a rhetorical question.
It looks more
But
like-
this is an icon of Santa Muerte. Santa Muerte is a folk saint in Central America. Not endorsed by any official Christian source. It's just kind of like a local phenomenon where people set up these statues of the skeleton woman, and they'll pray to her kind of like for the deceased. And the Catholic Church hates this because, I mean, it's basically just an icon, right? But the reason why these are on the screen is I want to call attention to something called essentialism. Essentialism is the idea that you can boil down something to a core, and then that core is the totality of that thing. I'm going to present everything as a totality. I'm going to present all this information as essential. But if I say something about Hindus and you go up and talk to a Hindu, chances are they may well not agree with what I say because their lived experience is different than mine. That's the purpose of calling attention to this, is that for all intents and purposes, this is not safe in a Christian context. But for those men and women who pray to Santa Muerte and have a very devout faith, they don't see it as a problem. Now, whether it is or not is outside of this class, but my point is that everybody lives out their religion differently. So I'm not quoting scripture here. Like, don't take anything I have too seriously. Nostra, Aetate, and essentialism. Also, when I get excited, I sometimes swear, so if I swear, I'm very sorry. I'm trying not to. I did it when I was practicing. I did it. But also, this meme was just really funny. Because I was homeschooled, and I'm also.
Yeah.
And a gangster.
And a gangster, let's go! Yeah. I had that there twice. What?
Oh, I love this picture.
Also, does anybody know who this is?
Yes, Buddha and Jesus.
Buddha and Jesus. Apparently, there's a manga in Japan where Buddha and Jesus are roommates, and that is really funny. That is hilarious.
I wanna what?
I wonder if that.
It's like the worst representation.
It's like totally like heresy, but it's just the idea makes me laugh. Does anybody have any questions though before we jump right into anything about Nostra Aetate?
So I was confused about the essentialism. So you're saying that the whole point of essentialism, you're saying that people practice their religions differently?
Right,
Or
so
is it like-
non-essentialism recognizes that everybody is different. Essentialism is trying to present a core. I'm presenting a core, but in actuality, people express their faiths in different manners.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're just acknowledging there's other.
Yeah, there's other people who do their thing that actually practice Hinduism, Buddhism. I am not
Yeah.
either of those things.
Okay.
I'm just a nerd.
And so you used like Day of the Dead and stuff like that.
Yes, because according to an essentialist definition, Santa Muerte is not a part of the Christian faith. But according to these Christians, it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'll send you a video of that. It's really interesting.
All right.
So any more questions? You can also just like raise your hand or shout out at me as we go through.
Maybe this goes beyond the scope of this class, and maybe it's something that, and maybe that's something that we can talk about later, but do you have a distinct definition? Do you have two different definitions, rather, between faith versus religion?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Although they're not synonyms, but they are like homogeneous.
Okay, they have overlapping.
Yeah, like they're part of the same system.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Faith being your belief in the thing on something unseen, and using that to like lead your life, and religion being a community, a tradition, and scripture from which you draw your faith.
Okay, cool. I wanted to make sure that there was like some kind of distinction, because I had one in my own mind and I wasn't sure if that was the case for other people.
Does that line up kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Hold
We
on.
learned this at
I learned
I know, I just quoted Hebrews 11.
Wait, you wanna read it?
You can read it, Kate.
Okay,
Don't
hold
you
on,
have
let
it
me find
memorized
it.
though?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
that's good.
okay. I did it for a bit. I
I
have the other three, but not the one I'm trying to say. Okay, it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance in what we do not see.
Yep.
Difference from religion.
I just added the like caveat where it also like leads you to act in a specific manner. If there's no more questions, go for it.
What's the name called, bro?
So
What's the manga? It's called Saint Young Men.
Same young man.
Yes.
Alright, I'm not gonna look it up, I'm just
You
curious.
should,
He's not gonna look it up.
He's asking for a friend.
I think actually they sell it at the bookstore.
That's crazy.
Um,
Long time.
I just think they look so funny.
I'm a bad life.
Alrighty, so I'm interested in the questions that these people are asking. And there are many, many questions that both Hinduism and Buddhism asks. But the one that I thought best summarized it, at least for what I'm about to say, is Hinduism asks, what do you really want? You see, in Hindu culture, which is a very, very ancient culture, dating back thousands of years, some of these myths are the oldest known myths in the world. Hindu culture says, you should pursue pleasure. You should do it. You know, you should eat good food, and you should go to cool places and enjoy the beauty of the world and the beauty of art, and probably have good sex and do all sorts of pleasurable things. There's a caveat that like you should still be like morally good, but you can kind of understand like the hedonistic elements of this. So you may think that you want pleasure, and you may go experience all these really enjoyable things, but according to Hindu philosophy, eventually you'll find these pleasures are lacking. You'll find them empty. And when you find pleasure is empty, you'll turn to something else. You'll pursue worldly success. You will try to be a successful business owner, or you might try to be a philanthropist, or a famous artist, or a renowned politician. The problem here is with pleasure, you're trying to fill yourself. For worldly success, you're trying to gather fame for yourself. And the self will always leave you hungry and empty and wanting. And so eventually you'll realize that, you know, this has been fun, but what I really want is not worldly success, but I need to diminish myself. I need to serve others. I need to let go of my ego, because my ego doesn't seem to be satisfied with anything I do. And instead, they turn to a duty to the community. At this point in a person's journey, they may give themselves up pretty wholly. Not H-O-L-L-Y, but W-H, you know, to a cause, right? To diminish yourself at the expense of others. And we as Christians, we have a similar idea, right? Sacrificial love, to find fulfillment. But the problem is that even then, people are self-centered, people are flickering, people are inconsistent and hypocritical. We might say people are sinful inherently. And if you try to find pleasure in other people, this is still the highest moral good. You're starting to escape yourself, but this is still not what you truly want. There's a caveat to this. Hindus believe in reincarnation. So that process that I just said, a moment ago, that could take hundreds of lifetimes or thousands of lifetimes to realize and make these distinctions of what is actually that you're after. But the funny thing is, you didn't start that way. Does anybody know about the Roman system of ranking souls?
Oh, I know what it is, but I forgot.
Well, basically, they're like a vegetable is down here,
It was like,
and then a baby is down here, and then a woman is here, and then a man is here. It's
Yeah.
very sexist and not cool, but the Hindus actually have a similar system.
like Romans would bury themselves with other soldiers so they could defend themselves in the afterlife.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was very Egyptian, even though it was Roman. It was very like it had. I think it's because of Alexander the Great, because he had this whole Egyptian crossover.
Probably.
But like he would bury himself with like other true soldiers in the afterlife. I don't know. I kind of like put y'all in the guys.
So, well, the point that I was getting at is
Yeah.
both the Romans and the Hindus had this idea that different things had different souls. That's kind of an imagination. But the idea is that your first life, you just kind of spring into existence, and you'll be the lowest of the low, which might be like a blade of grass. And then you might live your life as a blade of grass, and because it's automatic, you die, and then you reincarnate it into something slightly better, like, I don't know, a dandelion. Then you might be like a sunflower, and then a tree, and then a horse, I don't know. But there's a whole system of it, and you go from these lower things, this lower plane of being, into a higher plane of being, until eventually you become a human. That's when things get complicated. So inside of everybody, according to Hindu mythology, is something called a jivas, which inhabits a body. It's not equivalent to a soul. I mean, that's the closest thing you'll get to a soul. It's more of like a life force. It doesn't have like a personality exactly. And it has elements within it. But the point being is, in order for this jivas to escape the human body and continue upward in this reincarnation cycle, there's something called karma, which I'm sure everybody has heard of in like a joking way, like, oh, that's karma, da 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 da. Well, in Hindu culture, it's the way that the entire universe works. Karma is a sort of mythical power that states that when somebody does something good, they're rewarded in that life, and when they do something bad or malicious, they're punished for that. And so Hindus have a sense that the world is lawful, that it is logical and structured and foundational, and that the good get good, and so if they acquire enough karma, they reincarnate, and the bad are stuck in their human bodies, pursuing pleasure and worldly success.
So if you commit like mass genocide, you turn into like a flower.
No, it kind of like caps out at human.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can't get demoted?
You can't get demoted.
Well, then why would I turn to good?
Because that's not what you really want.
That's not what you want.
Is you'll do it and you'll probably feel like shit, and then you won't like go anywhere.
Swear words.
Oh yeah, there it is. I told you it was gonna happen. I told you.
So wait, are there like promotions within the human race? Like
Yes, thank you for asking.
So like you get like you got upgraded to like, oh, now you're 7 feet tall.
Tell the whole.
Not exactly like that. So, okay, there's a twofold question. Because what you're really asking about is like physical appearance. And many ancient cultures have this understanding that if you're physically beautiful, you kind of have like a good soul, or you're royalty. And you'll see that in a moment when we get to Buddha. But it's kind of dumb. Also, the second thing, in actuality, Hindus believe in a caste system. Has anybody heard of the Untouchables?
Yeah.
The what?
The Untouchables.
Maybe. Yeah, I was gonna say like the movie, the one with like talking about
The untouched. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
It's the movie, right? Yeah. Can you tell me about the movie?
Tell me about the movie.
Oh, the movie was like about the squad who was the FBI squad who was trying to get they were trying to indict Al Capone.
Oh.
Okay, that's probably not the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Untouchable.
Untouchable is
But untouchable is in the cast is right at the top, right?
you're at the bottom.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're untouchable because you don't want to touch them. They're
Really,
the lowest of the
really
low.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're
they're
talking
like-
about social.
Yeah.
You don't want to associate with them, you don't give them a job.
It's really exactly like the leper is. And Actually, I'm gonna come back to that in a second, because that's really interesting, the correlation there. But to lay it out plainly, in Hindu society, once you graduate from being, I don't know, a bird or some shit. I'm sorry. Once you graduate from being a bird, you become a female untouchable. These people are they're not quite slave labor, but they're basically that. You were not allowed to sit with people of a higher caste. You were not allowed to drink out of the same cup. If you they used to like make clay cups that they gave to untouchables, and then they would smash them afterwards. They are deeply poor, but they also do the most important like manual labor in Hindu society for thousands of years. After you graduate as a female untouchable, you become a male untouchable. See the sexism? After you become a male untouchable, you become a female worker, I believe, which is higher than the untouchables, and then a male worker, and then you become like a female warrior, which is kind of not inherently like a fighter, but maybe like somebody of great community status, like a politician, and then a male warrior, and then you become a female Brahmin. Little caveat, Brahmin is the name for the kind of head god in Hinduism. I'm not actually have time to talk about that, but it's also the name of the priest class. So at the very top is this elite priestly order that kind of looks down on everybody else, and very exclusively kind of contains their knowledge, because in their mind, only they are worthy of holding spiritual knowledge because they're at the top of this pyramid scheme. And then because you man Brahma, and then you escape.
Does that all happen in? This all happens in different lifetimes.
Yeah,
So that's
potentially thousands.
That's the reincarnation thing.
Exactly, yeah.
That's crazy.
And so
How do you know
lepers,
at the end? Like,
part of
how
the,
do you know? Oh, I'm sorry. This is probably could have asked this question earlier, but how do you know like that you actually are living multiple lifetimes? Like you just die and you like reincarnate and you're like, oh, this is my third lifetime.
I think
Time
the
to do
assumption
better
is
next time.
just
You
add
just never
past.
learn. The thing
Yeah.
is if you keep on rebirthing and you get a memory wipe, like how do you improve?
There are some.
It's just like luck. Like luckily I did better than last time, even though I have no idea what happened last time.
Well, I think the idea would be like cosmic forces that place you in a context to be better off than last
They're
time.
they're like nanny me. They're like,
So-
this person does this, like this will work.
Whoever invented the religion was probably on opiates, so.
Probably, I mean,
Well,
they're wrong.
Hinduism is the combination of
Yeah.
several different religions and several different groups combining over the course of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Cool?
Yeah, part of why I wanted to talk about just other religions, and then specifically talking about like Eastern religions, was that it's becoming increasingly popular in the U.S. for like loose sort of disembodied spiritualism to take on Hindu and Buddhist like aspects, like things like certain loose spiritual concepts like past lives,
Astrology.
karma, and astrology, things like that.
Yeah.
And typically in like reincarnation stuff, you will find, especially in like Chicago, like walking down the street, you'll see things on the side. It'll say like, "Come learn about your past lives," and people will sit down and talk to you and tell you.
Yeah, I
stories.
don't even know if Hindu gurus, like, I don't think there's a system of reflecting on your past life, but rather just an understanding that they existed. That's maybe.
Yeah, so, everyone is working towards this goal, right? And so how is there anybody still like at the bottom? Like, did it just like fail really bad? Is it like an application thing? Is the
There's a lot
right
of
essay?
people.
It's twofold. Firstly, it could be people failing. Yes. Secondfold, there's a lot of humans. And third, the understanding of your existence is almost like if I have a pool of water and I heat it up, and there will just be bubbles that burst and that air will escape. That's a similar sort of like rhythmic, uncontrollable, pseudo randomness that creates life. So there are new life forms kind of being spawned at random, would the assumption be.
Or like there is like concept of like dharma, right? Where like you have a duty, like in your given caste to perform certain like.
Yeah. There are defined sort
So
of
the idea
social
that
roles.
like if someone doesn't like fulfill their dharma, they don't or go up to the next caste, right?
That would seem
Is that what happens? That would
I
explain
don't know.
why, like, there's so
Yeah.
many untouchables, like.
Yeah, if they like didn't do the test. Well, that would be like, you know, if you look at Plato or something, Plato would say that if you're not really engaging with what is beautiful, then you're committing an injustice, which is immorally wrong. So that would make sense logically. I don't actually know. That didn't come up in my research, but I assume so.
So what about the people who you would generally say are good people, but bad things happen to them out of their
They
control?
still go up.
They'll still go up, and then the people that are bad, but nothing, like they don't have any justice in their lifetime, would
Typically, they would say that a next lifetime, you would curse other lifetimes, am I right?
What I wonder is how do you do good things as like you can't move, like immobile.
It's inherent. You inherently are good because you are inherently are good and of value. And so because you don't have conscious and there's no karma involved, you generate constantly through each life.
It's kind of hard to get promoted when you're like a flower.
Yeah, well, you're inherently promoted. You live your life as a flower and you
Well,
move
that's
on.
like you have your dharma, so like you do your duty as a flower and just be a flower.
You're just like a really bad flower.
It's like a whole,
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You set up.
Hey, so something about Hinduism is, I did this thing with St. Houston, it was Global Gates, and we went to Houston and we like went to a Hindu temple, a Buddhist temple, and a Muslim temple, or not temple, or what it's called, mosque, thank you. And in the Hindu temple, there's like 7, 8 gods that they all like
Yes.
go worship, you know, like a time.
I'll get to that in a little bit.
Oh.
Sort
I
of.
just had questions on that, my bad. Just jumping in.
Hold on to that. There's one more thing I want to mention before we move on, which is the thing about the lepers. The reason why Gandhi is such an important character in history is because he was an advocate that the untouchables were as important as the Brahmins, and that God loved them just as much as every other people, and that they should be treated with respect and kindness. That's why I keep talking about this in the past tense, because to a certain extent, there's still racism in India, I'm sure, but that's why he's really important, is because like Jesus going out to the lepers, he creates a culture of love towards the untouchables. It's also the group of people who Mother Teresa was talking with.
Sorry, question. What about things that are generally like disliked and hated, like mosquitoes and snakes and spiders, and like, is that a thing that you get demoted to, or is that just like this is my mission in life?
I would be hesitant to say that those things are disliked in other cultures because I don't know what the culture is. But I would assume, speaking generally, that you gotta be that snake, girl.
Yeah.
Slay! Slither! Slither! I don't think there's an understanding. Okay, I need to point out something. If karma means that the world is good, then the only bad is that injustices which man creates out of their own free will, and disrespect for the goodness of the world. Which is why Hindu culture is the only culture in the world that never created tragedies. They have no stories of tragedy at all, because to them, the world is perfect.
Yeah, that is true. Interesting. I do remember that right now.
So,
I can move on after you, go ahead.
like, what is like their logic for like how like other, because like if they say that like a religion says that this is how the world works, even if other people don't believe it. So what is like their logic for like other people around the world, like?
Oh, I can't wait to tell you, dude. It's so funny. Hinduism likes to claim other religions as their own, under different logical strains. So for instance, one of the most important gods in Hinduism is named Vishnu. Vishnu is this 6-armed blue man who reincarnates every time the world is faced with a crippling disaster. According to Hindus, Jesus is Vishnu. So, Christianity is just a form of Hinduism. And in fact, when I talk about Bhakata yoga, they're going to say that that's just what Christianity is. They're expressing their spirituality through this yoga that they were inspired through Vishnu. So they have no problem seeing other religions, even if they disagree with them, as a part of their collective.
I mean like the caste and everything, like.
Oh.
Yeah. How do they like do caste and like how are like do they see it as like being expressed differently, or that the other cultures are just not acknowledging the caste?
I don't know. I think there's an element of Hinduism that sets it apart, which is its immense flexibility, because it was spawned out of so many different traditions. So I think on the one hand, they would say that different cultures express it differently, and that's the caste system isn't an absolute form of reincarnation. People are still reincarnating, but there's just other expressions of it. And on the other hand, Plato's cave, they may not care because it's outside of their existence. I don't know. That would be a wonderful question to ask somebody who is in this religion. But I need to move on for the sake of time. So we were talking about reincarnation. I didn't set this slide up, dang it. Well, I think I've already pointed out that you're at this like third tier, serve your community, and you probably are getting the feeling that the self is too small to really fill. And you desire something so transcendent, something so satisfying, something that makes you whole, that you give up all those things. Yes?
I don't know if you're not gonna have an answer for this, but I just want to bring it to attention. If the world is inherently good, then what is the point of the religion escaping the world?
Because this.
Okay.
Because within your jivas is the Atman. The Atman is the nucleus of the soul. It contains within it infinite knowing, infinite being, and infinite joy. And in order to escape this world to another, you have to really open up that Atman and have it. Yeah, I mean, maybe, I'm not sure what
I
that
don't know if
actually
it's
means.
the right religion.
Usually it's expressed as a lotus in the heart.
Okay.
Or like the chest area. And to acknowledge the infinity within you, which sounds super cheesy, but it's an important thing to Hindu culture. And it's obtainable. It's moksha. The idea is the world is good, and it's good to experience these things, but eventually you'll realize that the self is lacking, and you'll realize that what you really want is liberation. And to get to liberation is to really cultivate this inner Atman. How in the world do you do that? Not through exercise at the YMCA.
I took that first.
I forget what yoga actually translates to in Sanskrit, but I think it's something like training.
Spiritual training.
Right, spiritual training. And this is another point where Hinduism is incredibly flexible because they recognize that everybody has a different spirituality, and everybody will come to God, which they use interchangeably with individual gods.
Right.
Kind of God as Brahma, God as the Godhead.
God plural.
Yeah. They're individual ways to come to God through different expressions. And so here are the four that are really central to Hindu culture. The first one is jnana yoga, which is the pursuit of God through deep knowledge and study. I think if you imagine the Franciscan monk every day wakes up, reads his Bible for 4 hours, prays for 4 hours, tends to his peas in his garden, reads his Bible for 4 more hours, and goes to sleep.
That's a good reference.
Thank you. That's kind of what Hindus are getting at here, is there are many, many, many myths and stories within the Hindu canon, and they all point, supposedly, back towards liberation, towards moksha. And so really to study these and to find what do they actually mean. That's one path. The second path,
Just to help you, the Sanskrit translation is to join or to yoke or to unite.
Oh, you're right, because it comes from the same word that we get for to yoke in English.
Oh, okay.
This is where it comes
etymology.
from.
Cool.
Yeah, because, oh man. All right, so
Mind blown.
because the
You have
theological
20 minutes
implications.
left, so you gotta go.
I'm so sorry, everybody. Baha Yoga is basically like Christianity, where you should love everybody and love the Atman and the God within them. Karma Yoga is, because karma actually means work. It means like finding the truth behind your occupation. And so, like, if you're a scientist and you really care about genetics, then in your Hindu discipline, as you're studying genetics, you know, really trying to figure out like what is the meaning behind the science. Not just what is the science, but what is the value that's behind it. Raja Yoga is a psychophysical exercise. This is what we probably think of when we're like, "Whoa," right? Because essentially this is a type of asceticism where you're disciplining the body so much and you're emptying the self of the body so much that you can kind of like unlock a different perspective on the world through physical exercise and different meditative practices. Which is deeply sad when you like see people at the YMCA, you're like, oh, I do yoga. Well, you're not actually engaging in any of these important spiritual things that the Hindus find. It's just kind of like almost cultural appropriation. Myths and traditions, there's a huge number of myths, and they all point back towards liberation. The most important of them is the Mahabharata, which is like it's an epic in its truest sense. It's this war between two groups of gods and men, and it's like a huge number of volumes. But overall, like, these gods exist as helpers for humans for each liberation, and there's an understanding that they're all really just shades of the same thing, and that even though people pray to them, they're all kind of amalgamations. Oh, also this stuff I'm not going to talk about. I think I talked about this. And I talked about, yeah.
We talked about
I talked about Brahma, the Godhead. So we got to quite
The
a lot of
elephant guy.
The elephant guy.
Dude, I love the elephant guy. I forget his name. The elephant guy is Vishnu's son, and Vishnu accidentally cut off his head and then used it with elephant.
What are they? Is Sikhism a sort of like a denomination?
Dude, Sikhism is so cool. So Sikhism is this dude who was in this Muslim and Hindu culture, and he basically went out for like 6 days, had tea with God, came back and said both the Islamics and the Muslims are wrong and right.
So you made a hybrid of
Exactly.
Interesting.
That's really interesting.
I wanted to know how Sikhism came to be. It's like
I want to answer
Hey,
questions.
the homies are back.
So that's why you have the. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the headbands are.
Because I think
don't know that.
well, the head thing is it has to do with the Muslims, but that usually has to do with females though. But I think is it kind of
Maybe I missed it, but the 4 yogas, what are you joining together? You have those.
Oh, I didn't get to explain it because Colton cut me out.
Colton.
I want you to get.
You are joining yourself to the spiritual.
Okay.
You are linking yourself to the Godhead through these practices.
Gotcha. Those are the connecting points,
Yes.
and those specific yogas. Those are how you bridge that.
Yes, because you know, you yoke one cow who is brand new to another cow who's learned to be submissive, and in that way you teach the new cow to be submissive because he sees like this other cow the way it's done.
Okay.
How much time do I have?
It's 48 right now.
Yep.
You have 12 minutes.
I have 12 minutes.
You can go a little
Speed
bit
run.
over, but
I'm so sad.
If you guys like need to leave, please don't feel like you have to
Absolutely.
stay. No, like if he goes over,
yeah.
then if you guys have to leave, you can leave. But we're here to stay as well.
Yeah, you gotta be light on your feet. No, you can do this.
Man.
You do it.
But don't confuse us at the same time.
Reincarnate to God?
No.
Are you working up to that status level?
No. Your goal is to liberate yourself, and in so being, you graduate to a higher plane.
What's the difference between a god and being at the highest being or open your lowest?
You recognize the ultimate potential of your humanity, and well, more specifically, your jivas, the soul, which is your true identity. And so, the ultimate purpose is to understand who you truly are by becoming your truest self, in a very physical and spiritual way. Those are not contradictions. And in doing so, then you kind of like get to graduate to go to.
Yeah, I've noticed that Buddhism is very like, not Buddhism, but like Buddhism is a very worldly, spiritualistic, like it's a hybrid of worldliness and spiritualism. It's like,
But Xander?
So is ascending to that higher plane seen as a gooder version of the good? Like, is the good
Yes.
of the world not good enough?
Yes.
So there's a gooder good.
There's infinite
There's
worlds. Up and down.
Infinite, okay, so
Whoa.
it's like the Grey Knights.
Yeah.
Hold on. I feel like we're having Doctor Strange level things how where you're like there's not just one and then a higher one, it's an infinite number up and an
Yeah, but
infinite
for the
number
sake of our
down.
discussion, that doesn't matter. It's just what do people do in this life that matters.
You're doing great.
Anna, and then we gotta go.
We want to know what you do after you've achieved that.
I have no
state.
clue. I tried to look up into it, and then it took me too long, and so
So
I
they
went
don't
to
know
Buddhism.
either.
I'm
So
sure
what's
they
the
do know,
point?
but
The point is to leave Earth, right, and get
no,
up
the
to
point
that
is to
high.
become full.
Yes, to become full and to get up to that high place. What then?
You're thinking from a Christological perspective. Heaven doesn't matter. The end doesn't matter. The future doesn't
Journey.
matter. The ends matter.
It's the journey.
I mean, do you also like
No,
compare that
that's
to
right, it's not
heaven?
the
Like, you go to heaven, then what then?
Yeah.
You know?
Like you got a little bit of that destination
That's a good
fever.
point.
Yeah.
It's very nihilistic.
Like there's no destination for them,
You're
you just
doing
go
great.
continually
Just go.
slow.
Just go.
Yeah.
Stop everyone.
Everybody ready for Buddhism? I love Buddhism. I like it more than Hinduism. Less racist.
You have a ranking of all religions?
Huh?
You have a ranking of all religions?
I do.
We should make it
Oh.
maybe
Get on a stream later today. I want to see you like place the blocks.
You know what I'd put at the bottom? Is people who say they're not religious but they're spiritual.
Dude,
I'll put those people at the bottom. They would, I mean, honestly, saying this would be
That's
above
the kind of Hindu influence in like California.
But Hindus would probably be like, what the hell are you doing?
Exactly.
Alright, Buddhism.
Okay, so back to the point of what questions do these things ask. If Hinduism asks, what do you really want? Buddhism asks, what distracts you? And to do this, I want to tell the story of Buddha. And I need to make it very clear that he is coming out of a Hindu culture. I don't know if he would have identified as being Hindu, but he was definitely surrounded by such influences. And so we're going to see a lot of the same themes in a certain way, kind of twisted. But before he was the Buddha, he was Siddhartha Gautama of the Chakras clan. He was born in Nepal in roughly 563 BC. This is a historical figure. This was a man who really lived. And he was prophesied to either conquer the world or redeem it. So remember how I said that in the ancient world, if you had a baby that was really beautiful, they were kind of like destined for something? Supposedly, Gautama was very, very beautiful. He was blessed with handsome features. And his father, being the smart feudal lord that he was, he went to a soothsayer and he said, "Tell me the future, prophesize over my baby," or something like that. And the soothsayer said, "Either this baby will accept the world, conquer it, unify India, and be a great leader, or he will reject the world and instead redeem it." And once again, being the good father that every feudal lord is, he decided, I'm going to choose this baby will be a conqueror. Because of course he did. Oh man, that's messed up. And so we get, Gautama grows up in a palace. He has everything he ever wants. He has nice clothes, he has feasts, he has a beautiful wife who's supposedly very loving and kind and intelligent. He's a son. There's music all the time. We have these elegant gardens. Supposedly there was 40,000 dancing girls at his beck and call. His father was making it absolutely imperative that Gautama never sees the ugliness of the world. Never sees any pain, any death, any of those negative emotions. And so, he's a noble in this time. He goes on horse rides. And normally, his servants, under order from the king, run out ahead and they clear the way. So that in case there's any ugliness in the road, Gautama would never see it. But supposedly, on one of these trips, they failed to do so. And This is the story of the 4 passing sites. So we're going down the road, and Gautama sees an elderly man, advanced in his age, really old on his kind of last leg, and he's shook. He's never seen anything like this. He's never been confronted with his own mortality, yeah. The fact that he's finite. And he goes back home and he thinks about it, and he takes another ride sometime later, and he sees a diseased man. I like to think about it, it's probably somebody with leprosy, right? Somebody who's so totally ravished by an illness that, you look at them and you're in pain because you're looking at them. And again, he is enamored and confused and mesmerized maybe a little bit by this state of being that he didn't know existed. And he takes a third ride, and he sees a corpse. This is really where his own mortality sets in, and he's lost. Everything like he's known his whole life has been set up to be one way, and he recognizes that there's a whole part of life that he doesn't know, that he doesn't understand, that he's scared of. And on the 4th trip, he sees a monk. It's interesting to point out that in some Hindu texts, this story is told, and that's actually a Hindu god incarnate, which is score 2 for Hinduism, trying to steal other religions. But he sees a monk, and the monk is clad in orange robes. He's living meekly. He probably has signs that he's been like fasting, but he looks happy. And Gautama goes home, and it's almost as if, oh, this is me and all, by the way. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. This isn't the Buddha statue, that's the Buddha statue. He's confused and heartbroken and devastated, and everything that he knew that was pleasurable suddenly falls out of favor, and it just becomes like a dim noise that distracts him. And he thinks about it, and he thinks about it, and he thinks about it, and he decides that, you know what, he's not going to find what he really wants, to quote Hinduism, in this temple, in this palace. And so what he does is he runs away. He actually leaves his wife and child, and he gets on a horse with his servant, and then the servant and him switch clothes, and he rides into the forest, never to be seen again for the next 6 years. The man on a mission to find an answers, really. And so supposedly there's 3 things that he does. The first thing he does is that he seeks out the smartest Hindu leaders to pick their brain. And he studies Raja Yoga. Remember those like spiritual exercises. And eventually he kind of gets bored of them. He is supposedly a man of great intelligence, and he like outwits them. And he learns a lot, but eventually he's like, all right, there's nothing else I can learn. So he joins an ascetic group. Do you guys know what asceticism is? Asceticism is the idea that you should diminish worldly things to kind of heighten spiritual things. Fasting is a type of asceticism. You, instead of eating, you focus on spiritual food. A historical Christian example would be in the 2nd, 3rd century. There was a group of Christians named the Desert Father and Mothers who left society, and they created a little community in the desert where they lived meekly, simply, you might say minimalistically, and they practiced a lot of these things. So Buddha's going to join one of these groups. And it said that he had such self-control that he was able to eat only 6 grains of rice a day. Which, okay, like, I don't know about that, but the point of the story is that he was of incredible self-control and incredible intelligence. Supposedly one time, he like tried to touch his belly and he grabbed a hold of his spine.
That just sounds like he has an eating disorder.
Oh.
Yeah, right? But no, he had self-control not to do it. And eventually, like, he almost starves himself to death, and a Hindu god shows up and feeds him, and he's like, okay, maybe this isn't what I want to do. I'm not going to find the answers by controlling my body, and I didn't find my answers in these Hindu leaders. I'm just going to go and meditate, basically. That's not really the train of thought, but in India, there's this place known as the Bodha tree. before this moment. It's known as the Bo tree. And so Gautama, knowing with all this information in his mind, he goes and he sits down under this tree. And over the course of the next 49 days, he will become the man who woke up, or the Buddha. That's literally what it translates to. It's almost like you're waking up from a dream. And so what happens under this tree? Well, he sits down to meditate, and there's this character named Mara, who's very much just like the devil, basically. It's a tempter character, and he spends the next 49 days tempting Gautama. And he does all sorts of things. He, I think his first temptation is he summons like 3 voluptuous women or something. And then his second one is like, he summons hurricanes and hailstorms and all sorts of supernatural things to try and like get him to stop meditating. And Gautama is so entranced under this tree that it doesn't faze him. One of the later things that he does is eventually Mara tries to appeal to his like sense of intelligence, and so he goes up to him, and he's like, this devil character, and he's like, "What are you even doing? You're just a human. Like you don't have any means to become God. You don't have any like means to understand these divine things. You're just a bug." And then supposedly Gautama like puts his finger on the ground, and then the earth responds, "I bear you witness." And then Mara's like, "Oh shit." And these temptations continue for 49 days until at once and sort of sporadically there's a moment of bliss and enlightenment, this like divine realization of supernatural things. I don't know what he learned under there, but supposedly there was a moment where he realizes the truth and he wakes up and he becomes the Buddha, and all across creation there's like blooming flowers and trumpets are playing and crazy shit. Four what?
Christian gangster.
Oh, you're counting me? But then the Buddha stands up after having understood these universal things. And there's one last temptation. Mara goes up to him and he says, "Okay, you've done it. You now understand what it means to truly be human. You've unlocked your Atman. You've escaped samsara. But who's gonna listen to you? Like, these things that you learned are not of man, and these infidel creatures are just squandering over what they really have." And supposedly the Buddha responds with, "There will be some who listen." And with that, never saw Mara again. And this sparks a 45-year, not transformation, but basically discipleship, where the Buddha travels all throughout India, and he talks, he starts not a monastery, but kind of like a group of disciples who are very devout. And it should be pointed out, I think I forgot to mention this, but at this time in Hinduism, those Brahmins were at the peak of their power, and they were being kind of gatekeeping. They were really like being exclusive about the knowledge that they had, and they were basically saying like, "Oh no, you guys will never reach, your full potential. You'll never escape this realm because it will take thousands of years, and nobody's really ready." And so what was compelling about the Buddha was that he was a man, he was rich, but he never considered himself above others. And yet he was able to do this. He was able to reach his full potential in one lifetime. And that becomes really compelling to many post-Hindus who become the first followers of Buddhism. And supposedly he was a man of deep compassion and cool demeanor. He's like a combination of Socrates and Mother Teresa. Where he was a deep rationalist. People would come to him with problems and he'd break them down and return to them, like really help them through whatever they were going through. He was also a man who thought that you need time to recharge. you know, he would spend 6 years out in civilization, and then he'd take his monks and for 6 months, and then he'd take his monks for 3 months into the wilderness and have a retreat where they kind of like restore themselves. And it kind of gets to like cycles and we'll talk about that.
So, like, Buddhism is sort of like, makes Hinduism more, like, not obtainable, but sort of like, puts it in a new light, or puts it in a more, not realistic, I don't know how to explain it, but basically it's like, what Hinduism is unachievable because they have this sort of selfishness of like trying to attain.
Yeah, that's
sort of, I've learned that Hinduism is very like self-centered, like it's about me and trying to ascend, whereas other people, it's like, you know, you're lower than me. Whereas I think Buddhism is sort of like the more of a loving side of it.
Yeah. Well, if you recall, there are different ways of obtaining your full potential in Hinduism, and some are way more loving than others.
Right.
But I do think, and Hinduism and Buddhism both have this understanding that you are the one ascending.
Right.
You pull yourself by your bootstraps to get there. And there are helpers along the way.
Yeah.
So I have like 2 more slides, which is what in the world do Buddhists actually believe? What did he get, like what knowledge was he imparted with under that tree? Well, twofold. These are basically the framework of every Buddhist conversation ever. Here we go. I didn't set that one right. The first noble truth is that life is suffering. Life is painful, it's unfulfilling, it's hard. You may live your entire life and there be no justice. This is known as dukkha. The cause of suffering is desire. We desire things, we pursue these things, and either we get them and then we're like empty and we desire more and more, or we don't get them and because of our desire is so strong we feel empty because of that. And so the third noble truth is that in order to start to contain your desire, you need to like start to facilitate things of the spirit. And then the fourth noble truth is known as the Eightfold Path. And this is basically like once you've accepted these other things and you're basically a monk, you can start living out this path. Here are the full 8 noble truths. I don't know if I'm going to go through all of them, but I'm going to give you some like important ideas, which is you need the right mindset. You need to understand what is truth and where are you going and where you're at. You need to, and to do that, you need to really like self-discipline yourself to have the right mentality, to think about truth, to speak truth. You need the right speech. Are you pointing people, are you saying loving things? Are you being kind? Are you pointing people towards truth in your speech? Clearly I'm not because I scored 4 times, but you know, Buddhists would say like, be conscious of what you say, be conscious of what you think, be conscious of what you do, and in all things, discipline yourself to do what is morally right and what is truthful, and what will ultimately help you and others escape samsara. I've been throwing this word around, it's because I forgot to add a slide to it. Samsara is the cycle of suffering, because if you remember, this is coming out of Hinduism, so we have like cycles, we have reincarnation. Samsara is a Buddhist word for being reincarnated over and over again and just being like dreadful.
Okay, so Buddhism is also reincarnation?
Yes. Except for they don't have like the whole caste system, and like at any point somebody can be like, I'm gonna follow truth.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's it. Like there's more stuff to this. You should meditate and practice right from that.
Do you know where the whole idea of chakras come from?
Yes. So chakra is a old Hindu medical idea that you have energy through your body, and that you can do certain exercises and sort of practices to open up different chakras to make your body more healthy.
That's Hinduism.
Yeah, that's from Hinduism. And Taoism, really.
Why don't you wrap up with the Nostra and Aetate?
Oh, what do you want me to say? Also, Buddhism gets spread into everything, and it's really interesting because it gets combined with local religions because of Marvel philosophy. Also Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, big time. Who's that? Harry rubbed his belly?
Yeah, they do. Okay, so there's actually multiple Buddhas. After the one who led the way, it's kind of like the first. There are different Buddhas in different cultures. So there's a Chinese Buddha. I don't remember what his name is, but that's the fat dude. And basically his whole thing was that you can obtain nirvana, that like ultimate paradise, because Buddhists don't believe in infinite worlds. You can obtain nirvana and still like enjoy the pleasures of the world. So that's why he's so fat, because he likes eating. You know, he likes having a good time.
What's up with the orange? I do. Orange
So
chicken?
orange in Hindu and Buddhist culture signifies fire, vitality, spiritual life. So kind of like how in Shinto you have a lot of red, which signifies like this is a spiritually vibrant, sacred place.
So monks wear orange.
Monks wear orange, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one too.
That is just like a Chinese,
Just
American
the
thing.
lucky cat.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
to
To
bless,
China, they don't
it's to
actually
bless
have
the establishment. Because it's like, sort of like, you know, it's like to ward off bad spirits.
I have a question. Were you planning on talking about
No.
intro thing? So I thought maybe segue into that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Not only do I not know anything about them, but
It's basically like someone take a card and they're like, okay, well, this card produces somehow.
In the middle of
okay, so
sushi buffet.
there's one more thing I'm gonna read because Golden asked me nicely. And I don't know how helpful this was. Hopefully you guys learned something. My goals were to foster respect and to foster understanding. You know, Colton and I were talking in the car yesterday, and I was like, it's really interesting because the greatest sin, so to speak, in Buddhism is ignorance. Ignorance of yourself, ignorance of others, ignorance of what you can become. And so everything that I just mentioned in the Eightfold Path is about recognizing where you are ignorant and learning to learn, really. And so I hope that at the very least you guys learned something. But to conclude, I want to read one more section from this document, because after kind of what I said, it actually goes into Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism, and says like, here's some like godly things within them. Religions, however, that are bound up with an advanced culture and struggle to answer the same questions by means of more refined concepts in a more developed language. Thus, in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mysteries and express it through an inexhaustible abundance of myths and through searching philosophical inquiry. They seek freedom from the anguish of our human condition, either through ascetic practices or profound meditation, or a flight to God with love and trust. Again, Buddhism in its various forms realizes the radical insufficiency of this changeable world, samsara. It teaches a way by which men in a devout and confident spirit may be able either to acquire the state of perfect liberation or obtain by their own efforts or through higher hope, supreme illumination. Likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner by proposing ways comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. Thank you guys for your time and your
I mean, I think it's really interesting, like, you can see that even on like a fundamental level, that just humans in general have the same sense of longing for God and the understanding innately of these kinds of concepts like sin and brokenness in the world, the relationship between like hedonism and the sort of emptiness that occurs. Like, I think it's what's interesting is that the document says there's rays of truth that are reflected in these other religions. Comes that like there is an innate human desire to seek God and to recognize the things of Christian understanding, and so like that desire is expressed in a twisted way in other religions, but the echo is the same. And so it's really, I think that it was a really great job.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for staying at your class, by the way.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together, not just in this place, but all over the world, that people can come together in worship of you, in pursuit of truth. Thank you for the answers to these questions that you give. Thank you for being empathetic and here for us. Thank you for being a high priest that stands beside us through these trials, that we don't have to figure this out on our own, that we don't have to sit under a tree and meditate to understand what you really want of us, because you came to us to tell us what the answer is yourself. Thank you, Lord. In your name do we live and pray. Amen.
Thank you very much.
Great job. Oh yeah, like, so I am going to provide volleyball.
17th.